Hello, the Pioneer viewers. As you know, our agenda is the Russia-Ukraine war. While the war continues in its all reality, news from the front line reveals the state of the war. It is possible to observe many crises caused by this theft of war in the field. You can see the devastating effects of the war even in the eyes of the people. For this reason, rulers should calculate every possibility before making a war decision. If there are deficiencies in the calculations, heavy costs and losses may occur on the battlefield. Losses and the heavy costs cause more difficult processes to begin for the country. In addition, the physical inadequacies and other factors that challenges armies in the case of the war is geography. Geographical and climate conditions constitute one of the biggest challenges in the war process. Climate conditions greatly affect the activities of the military units. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is approaching its second year. Throughout the entire war, the common enemy of both armies has been winter conditions. During the past winter, apart from the mutual clashes, the common challenges for both sides have been the seasonal conditions. As the seasonal conditions become more difficult, military activities become more difficult. The Ukrainian army was relatively less affected when it was in a defensive position before the launching counteroffensive operations. The Russian army, on the other hand, was adversely affected by the winter conditions while continuing its invasion attempts. Nowadays, since the Ukrainian army has also switched to an offensive posture, winter conditions pose a risk for the Ukrainian army as well. However, the Ukrainian army's winter preparations seems to have intensified. The Russian army is also making some preparations for winter. The coming winter is expected to bring significant changes in the course of the conflict. Now, if you're ready, let's examine the preparations against the upcoming winter conditions. As the Pioneer, we continue to report on the Russia-Ukraine war. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so that you don't miss our daily map reports and reports on the agenda. I also read all your comments on our videos. Please continue to share your ideas about our content in the comments with us. Let's start if you're ready. The Pioneer reports. The Ukrainian army and the Russian army are making important preparations on the front lines. The approaching winter is expected to bring rainy and freezing weather to the war zone. For this reason, both armies are carrying out excavation work on the different parts of the 600-mile front line. Both sides are trying to capture key areas ahead of the traditional winter slowdown. Furious fighting can be seen along the long line of contact at some points along the front line. Both armies are in a race against time. Temperatures are dropping below or approaching freezing, as in the war zones in southern and eastern Ukraine. The Ukrainian army continues its counter-offensive operations in the eastern and southern regions. Rainy weather conditions sometimes reduce the effectiveness of the operations. The Ukrainian army is trying to preserve its gains as it tries to carry out its latest operations before the winter conditions become more severe. Ukrainian troops are still conducting their main counteroffensive operations in the southern Zaporizhia direction, where Kyiv plans to break Russian lines and cut the land bridge linking occupied Crimea to western Russia. Blocked by the Russian defenses, Ukraine's advance there has slowed, but officials in Kyiv have pointed to success in destroying key Russian supply networks and artillery. The Ukrainian army has severely limited the capabilities of the Russian troops in the region. Ukrainian troops are actively attacking the southern Kherson front line along the Dnieper River. Since the liberation of the Kherson in November 2022, Kyiv forces have established important foothold on the Russian-occupied eastern bank of the river, which forms most of the southern front line. The waterway, in fact, is a significant obstacle, but the Ukrainian operations in the area pose a significant threat to the Russian military. The Ukrainian army's threats are pushing the Russian army into a corner. The presence of the Ukrainian army approaching the Crimea region is a source of concern for the Russian troops. Russian forces are still conducting offensives in northeastern Luhansk Oblast and around the Donetsk Oblast city of Avdiivka, which has been heavily fortified by the Ukrainian army since 2014. The attacks of the Russian troops in the region are being successfully repelled by the Ukrainian defense. The defense success of the Ukrainian army seems to be an important obstacle for the Russian army. In winter conditions, the frozen ground can make it difficult to support heavy tracked vehicles such as tanks. Russia's full-scale invasion began in February 2022, towards the end of the winter freeze. Despite ultimately failing to reach Kiev and topple the government, the late winter offensive took over areas of Ukraine. Despite the challenges, it is expected that the offensive and fighting will not stop in the coming winter season. Last year, Russia launched a largely unsuccessful winter offensive, but the operation laid the groundwork for the capture of Bakhmut in the late spring. This year, Kiev authorities expect more action around Avdiivka as fall turns to winter. But unlike the last year, this year the Ukrainian army has built a strong defense network. The Ukrainian military's strong defenses are likely to significantly limit Russian activities in the region. Ukrainian military spokesman Alexander Shutpot announced that the other day that they are expecting the third wave of the offensive. Stating that preparations are being made against the expected wave of attack, the spokesman said that they are ready for any situation. It has been determined that the Ukrainian army's action plans for winter are ready. It was announced that the preparations and the plans made for a long time have been clarified. Ukrainian official Vladimir Fito announced that the Ukrainian army's winter action plan. According to the statements, the Ukrainian army will target Russian logistics during the winter season. In addition to the cold weather awaiting for the Russian army, it will also have to fight hunger as a result of logistic disruption. Important preparations are being made against the attacks of the Russian army targeting the Ukrainian infrastructure. First of all, the Ukrainian army is putting its critical areas under intense and strong protections. The protected points will be protected by the powerful air defense systems. Missile and drone attacks of the Russian army will be prevented by the Ukrainian defense. We are almost halfway through November, and we must be prepared for the fact that the enemy may increase the number of drones or missile attacks on our infrastructure. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that last week. All Ukrainian units are preparing for this reality. The winter slowdown of major offensive operations raises the prospect that it could mean new opportunities for peace talks, which have not been dormant since early stages of the war. But neither Ukraine nor Russia is showing any signs of compromise. President Vladimir Putin and his top officials have repeatedly demanded recognition of Kiev's occupation of large parts of the south and east of the country, while Ukraine is still seeking the full liberation of the territories seized by Moscow. It remains to be seen whether the approaching winter will bring significant changes in the war. What do you think about the Ukrainian army's winter preparations? Do you think the Russian army will be able to successfully survive the winter conditions? What impact do you think the winter will have on the course of the war? How do you interpret the Ukrainian army's counterattacks? Let me know in the comments. I read and care about all your comments.